The French Revolution terrified the other monarchies of Europe. It persuaded the Holy Roman Empire and Prussia to form an alliance of sorts to intervene if King Louis's life was in danger. However, in 1792 the French went ahead and declared war on them first, hoping to export their revolution. Also, when Louis was executed, Spain and Portugal declared war on France, and later France would declare war on Britain and Holland. So by 1793 France was then at war with most of Europe, who had formed the First Coalition. But despite some early setbacks, the French army was incredibly large due to mobilization, and they were able to crush the smaller armies of Europe. They annexed the Rhineland and Austrian Netherlands, reclaimed Corsica, and created puppet states out of the Netherlands and Spain. Meanwhile, Napoleon was a general campaigning in Italy, and he conquered the north of the peninsula during the War of the First Coalition, which lasted until 1797. However, the following year, Napoleon sought to undermine British trade in the east and block their route to India by taking Ottoman Egypt. So Britain and Austria formed a second coalition against the French. Although the Prussians remained neutral, Russia entered the war, while the Ottomans fought the French in Egypt. The Russians helped stop French advances in Italy, but a coalition invasion of the Netherlands ended in failure. Meanwhile, Napoleon's invasion of Egypt also proved to be disastrous, so he returned to France in 1799 and seized power in a coup. In response to British policy of searching ships, Russia left the war and set up the Armed League of Neutrality with Prussia, Sweden and Denmark. So Britain attacked Denmark and forced it to leave the League. The War of the Second Coalition would continue until 1802, and Napoleon brought Switzerland and Tuscany into his empire. However, in the Americas the French were having less success. They had fought a brief naval war with the US over debts, the Quasi-War, and the slaves of Haiti had revolted. So Napoleon gave up on the Americas and sold Louisiana, which he had just received from Spain, to the United States. Instead, he spent his time planning on invading Britain and crowning himself emperor. However, Sweden broke off relations with France and formed an alliance with Britain, a third coalition. By 1805, Britain and Sweden were joined by Austria and, under their new Tsar, Russia. The British managed to prevent Napoleon from invading the UK by crushing their navy at the Battle of Trafalgar. But on land, Napoleon seemed somewhat invincible. He occupied Vienna and then crushed the Austrians and Russians at Austerlitz, forcing them to surrender. This allowed him to expand the newly found Kingdom of Italy and take Naples. Plus, he moved into Germany, where he dissolved the Holy Roman Empire and formed the Confederation of the Rhine out of his puppet states. However, this worried the Prussians, who finally re-entered the war and formed the Fourth Coalition in 1806. This time though, the Austrians remained neutral, leaving Prussia to be occupied within a year. In the following peace, Napoleon expanded his German holdings and created the Duchy of Warsaw in the east. Also, Russia, seeking Finland, decided to swap sides and declare war on Sweden. Now, with all of continental Europe under Napoleon's grip, he set up the Continental System, blocking all trade with Britain. In response, Britain bombarded Copenhagen again to neutralize the nation, fought the Russians briefly, and began to support Spanish rebels. The British then invaded Spain and linked up with the rebels, but this campaign proved to be long and costly for both sides. Nevertheless, looking to capitalize on British involvement in Spain, the Austrians hastily formed a sixth coalition. But fighting alone, they were defeated within months and lost a lot of territory. For a couple of years, only the war in Spain challenged Napoleon. That was until Russia, who suffered through the lack of trade, pulled out of the Continental System in 1812. So Napoleon mustered together an army of 500,000 people and marched into Russia. But the Russians pulled back, burning crops and towns, including Moscow, to the ground. Although Napoleon entered Moscow in September, the Russians refused to surrender. So with poor morale and dwindling numbers, Napoleon retreated. But in the dead of winter, he was forced along the same road he came on, and only a fraction of his army survived. As the Russians advanced, nations swapped sides and formed the Sixth Coalition. Together, they defeated Napoleon at Leipzig in 1813 and then pushed into Paris. Napoleon was forced into exile in Elba near Italy, but he soon managed to escape. Back in France, he mustered together an army of loyal supporters and started the Seventh Coalition War. But the British and Prussians defeated him at Waterloo in 1815 and exiled him to St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. The French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars reshaped the world. Amongst other things, they created modern notions of nationalism, introduced mobilization and total war, ended the Holy Roman Empire, liberalized Europe and ended absolutism, and encouraged independence and unification movements across the world.